In a quiet community park, a simple game of soccer turns into a moment that changes everything for 10-year-old Isaiah Morgan and his mother, Danielle. What begins as an afternoon of carefree play becomes the spark for a movement that will challenge a system and inspire a community. This is a story about courage in the face of bias, a mother's unwavering fight for justice, and a young boy finding his voice against all odds. But what really happened that day? How did one small moment ripple into a call for change? Stick around to uncover the truth, the triumphs, and the lessons we can all take from Isaiah's journey. If you're ready to be inspired, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments, what does justice mean to you? Let's start a conversation. Now let's dive into the story. The late afternoon sun painted a golden glow across Liberty Park, a popular urban escape in Fairview, Illinois. Children's laughter rang out over the rhythmic creak of swings, and parents chatted on benches, sharing warm smiles. Among them was 10-year-old Isaiah Morgan, a boy who seemed to radiate joy. His oversized soccer ball bounced ahead of him, a familiar companion in his small but vibrant world. Isaiah's mother, Danielle Morgan, was a pillar of the community and a respected family court judge. Known for her fairness and compassion, Danielle had worked tirelessly to uphold justice in her courtroom. At home, however, she found it harder to balance her demanding career and parenting. That afternoon, Isaiah finally convinced his mother to let him go to the park alone. "I'll stay close, Mama," he promised, his big brown eyes full of earnest determination. "You don't have to worry." Danielle had hesitated, but relented. "Just be careful," she said, her voice firm but loving. "And call me if you need anything." Isaiah dashed off with his ball, his scuffed sneakers kicking up little puffs of dust on the sidewalk. For him, the park was freedom, a slice of heaven where he could pretend to be a soccer star, scoring the game-winning goal. At the edge of the park, Officer Clint Harlow sat in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd with an air of detachment. The day had been uneventful, and Harlow found himself restless. When his gaze landed on Isaiah, something stirred a vague irritation he couldn't name. The boy didn't seem to belong. His worn clothes and carefree demeanor felt out of place among the well-dressed families enjoying the park. Harlow muttered to himself, "What's this kid up to?" He watched as Isaiah chased his soccer ball, oblivious to the officer's scrutiny. Probably trouble waiting to happen, Harlow thought. Isaiah, unaware of Harlow's focus, played with abandon. He kicked the ball high, trying to mimic his favorite soccer player's signature move. When the ball rolled toward the edge of the park, Isaiah jogged after it, smiling as he imagined the cheers of an imaginary crowd. As he bent to pick up the ball, he heard a voice sharp and authoritative. "Hey kid, what do you think you're doing?" Isaiah turned, startled, to find Harlow standing a few feet away. The officer's imposing figure loomed over him, his hand resting casually on his belt. Just playing soccer," Isaiah said, his voice small. Harlow frowned. "Where are your parents? You live around here?" "Yes, sir," Isaiah replied, clutching the ball to his chest. "My mom said I could come." Harlow's tone grew sharper. "Is that so? What's your name, kid?" "Isaiah," he answered hesitantly, feeling the weight of the officer's gaze. Harlow leaned in slightly. "Well, Isaiah, it's my job to keep this park safe. You're not causing trouble, are you?" Isaiah shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, sir." The interaction, though brief, left Isaiah shaken. He hurried back to the field, his joy replaced by unease. Harlow watched him for a moment longer before returning to his car, his mind clouded with vague justifications for his actions. Meanwhile, across town, Danielle was finishing her workday. She glanced at her phone, half expecting a call from Isaiah. The silence reassured her, but a nagging worry lingered. At the park, Isaiah tried to shake off his encounter with Harlow. He returned to his game, but the ball felt heavier, and the laughter of nearby children seemed distant. He couldn't explain it, but the officer's words replayed in his mind, leaving him unsettled. Harlow, still parked at the edge of the park, occasionally glanced in Isaiah's direction. Though no wrongdoing was apparent, he felt a need to remain vigilant. His assumptions about the boy had taken root, coloring every movement with suspicion. As the sun began to set, Isaiah decided it was time to head home. He tucked the ball under his arm and started toward the gate, his steps slower than usual. Unbeknownst to Isaiah, his encounter with Harlow hadn't gone unnoticed. A bystander, Ryan Cole, had observed the interaction and found it unsettling. Pulling out his phone, he recorded a short video and uploaded it to a community forum with the caption, "Why is this boy being harassed for playing soccer?" The video quickly gained traction. Within hours, it spread across social media, sparking outrage. Comments poured in, questioning the officer's behavior and expressing sympathy for Isaiah. By the time Danielle arrived home, she had a dozen missed calls and an anonymous message containing the video. As she watched it, her heart sank. Seeing Isaiah's nervous responses to Harlow's pointed questions filled her with a mix of anger and sorrow. That night, Danielle sat with Isaiah at the kitchen table. She gently asked about his day, carefully avoiding any mention of the video. "It was okay," Isaiah said, his eyes fixed on the table. But when Danielle pressed him, his composure faltered. "The officer, he kept asking me questions like I did something wrong," he admitted, his voice trembling. Danielle reached across the table, taking his small hand in hers. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said firmly. "You have every right to be in that park." Isaiah nodded, but the doubt in his eyes lingered. As he went to bed, Danielle sat alone in the living room, staring at the video on her phone. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let this incident go unanswered. That night, Isaiah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Shadows from the tree outside danced on the walls, but instead of finding comfort in their familiar shapes, he felt uneasy. His mind replayed the interaction with Officer Harlow, trying to make sense of it. Why had the officer assumed he was doing something wrong? Was it because he looked different from most of the other kids at the park? Isaiah wasn't sure, but the thought made his chest tighten. He hugged his pillow close, wishing for the carefree feeling he'd had earlier that afternoon. But the laughter and warmth of the park felt like a distant memory, replaced by Harlow's sharp words and the cold look in his eyes. Downstairs, Danielle sat in the dimly lit kitchen, her laptop open in front of her. The video of Isaiah's encounter with Harlow played on repeat, though she could barely bring herself to watch it again. Each time she heard Isaiah's soft voice trembling as he answered the officer's questions, a pang of guilt cut through her. She had always taught Isaiah to be respectful, to follow the rules, and to speak politely to authority figures. Yet none of that had mattered. Danielle's phone buzzed with notifications. Messages from colleagues and friends poured in, offering support or sharing their outrage about the video. One message stood out, though, a text from her sister, Renee, a community organizer who had spent years fighting for racial equity. "This is bigger than Isaiah, Danny. Let me know how I can help." Danielle stared at the message, torn. She didn't want Isaiah to become the center of a public spectacle, but she also couldn't ignore the implications of what had happened. Finally, she replied, "I need time to think. I'll call you tomorrow." Isaiah came down to breakfast the next day, his usual cheerfulness subdued. Danielle noticed the way he avoided meeting her eyes and the hesitation in his steps. "Good morning, baby," she said, keeping her tone light. "What do you want for breakfast?" "Just cereal," Isaiah mumbled, sliding into his chair. Danielle poured him a bowl, sitting down across from him. "Isaiah, about yesterday," he froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. "What about it?" "I saw a video," Danielle said gently. "Someone recorded what happened with the officer." Isaiah's face fell. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Danielle continued, reaching for his hand. "You didn't deserve it. None of that was your fault." Isaiah shrugged, his voice small. "It's okay. He didn't hurt me or anything." "That doesn't make it okay," Danielle said firmly. "What he did wasn't right, and I want you to know that. You have every right to feel upset." Isaiah nodded, but his expression remained guarded. Danielle decided not to push him further, resolving instead to let him process his feelings at his own pace. Across town, Officer Harlow sat in his patrol car, scrolling through his phone during a break. His feed was flooded with posts about the video, each one more critical than the last. "Officer Harlow's behavior is unacceptable," one post read. "He clearly profiled that boy." Justice for Isaiah. Another comment said, "This is why we need police reform. Kids shouldn't feel unsafe in a park." Harlow clenched his jaw, tossing his phone onto the passenger seat. The criticism stung, but not because he thought it was justified. To him, the public was blowing things out of proportion. "I was just doing my job," he muttered to himself. "People don't understand how hard it is out here." Yet, deep down, a small voice whispered doubts he wasn't ready to face. Had he acted out of line? Was it possible that his assumptions about Isaiah had been unfair? Harlow quickly pushed the thought aside. He wasn't about to let social media dictate how he felt about his work. As the video continued to circulate, the community began to organize. Renee reached out to local leaders, including a pastor, a youth advocate, and a retired police captain, to discuss the incident. They planned a town hall meeting to address concerns about racial profiling and policing practices. Danielle reluctantly agreed to attend. She wasn't sure how much she wanted to share about Isaiah's experience, but she knew the issue was too important to ignore. Meanwhile, Isaiah overheard snippets of conversations between his mother and Renee. Words like systemic bias and reform floated through the air, but they felt distant and abstract. For Isaiah, the situation wasn't about systems or policies, it was about how he felt when Harlow looked at him, like he didn't belong. That afternoon, Danielle received an unexpected call from Captain Denise Walker, a retired officer who had worked in the same precinct as Harlow years ago. "Judge Morgan," Denise said, her voice steady but warm, "I saw the video. I wanted to let you know that not all officers are like Harlow. What he did was wrong, and it needs to be addressed." Danielle was surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Captain Walker. I appreciate your support. I'm actually working with a group that pushes for accountability within the department," Denise continued. "If you're open to it, I'd like to help in any way I can." Danielle hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'd like that. Thank you." A few days later, Isaiah tentatively asked Danielle if he could go back to the park. "Are you sure?" Danielle asked, concern evident in her tone. "I think so," Isaiah said. "I don't want to be scared to go there." Danielle decided to accompany him, sitting on a nearby bench as he kicked his soccer ball around. At first, Isaiah felt self-conscious, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. But as the minutes passed, the familiar rhythm of the ball against his feet began to soothe him. By the time they left, Isaiah felt a little lighter. It wasn't a full return to normal, but it was a step in the right direction. The auditorium of Fairview Community Center buzzed with activity as residents filled the seats. Flyers announcing the town hall had circulated throughout the neighborhood, promising a discussion on community safety and racial bias in policing. Danielle Morgan sat in the front row, flanked by her sister Renee and Captain Denise Walker. Isaiah sat beside her, fidgeting nervously. Danielle had debated whether to bring him, but Isaiah had insisted. "I want to hear what they say, Mama," he had said with quiet determination. The moderator, Pastor Lawrence Avery, opened the meeting with a somber tone. "We are here tonight because of what happened to a young boy in our community," he said, gesturing toward Isaiah. "But this isn't just about him. This is about all of us and the kind of future we want to build for our children." The crowd murmured in agreement. Renee was the first to speak, her voice clear and commanding. She recounted Isaiah's experience and emphasized the broader issue of systemic bias. "What happened to my nephew isn't an isolated incident," she said. "It's part of a pattern, and we need to address it now." Next, Captain Walker shared her perspective as a retired officer. "Accountability doesn't weaken policing, it strengthens it," she said. "We can't protect and serve if communities don't trust us." As the floor opened for questions, the atmosphere grew tense. Some residents expressed anger and frustration, while others shared personal stories of being profiled or mistreated. Then a man in the back raised his hand. Eric Calloway, a local business owner, asked, "What's being done to make sure this doesn't happen again?" "Words are good, but we need action." Danielle stood, her voice steady but resolute. "We're pursuing accountability for the officer involved," she said. "But this is also about creating systemic change. We need better training, independent oversight, and policies that ensure fairness and equality." Her words were met with applause, but Isaiah noticed a few skeptical faces in the crowd. Meanwhile, Officer Clint Harlow sat in his supervisor's office, arms crossed defensively. The video of his interaction with Isaiah had sparked an internal investigation, and he was summoned to answer questions. "I didn't do anything wrong," Harlow said firmly. "I was just doing my job." Chief Walter Simmons, a grizzled veteran nearing retirement, sighed. "Clint, this isn't just about you. That video's a problem for the entire department." "What was I supposed to do? Ignore him?" Harlow asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "You were supposed to exercise better judgment," Simmons replied. "We're putting you on administrative leave while this is sorted out." Harlow's jaw tightened. "You're throwing me under the bus." "No," Simmons said quietly. "You put yourself here." As Harlow left the office, his mind raced. The scrutiny was suffocating, but he clung to the belief that he was being unfairly targeted. Over the following days, the hashtag Justice for Isaiah continued to gain traction. Local news stations picked up the story, and national outlets soon followed. Activists called for systemic reforms, including bias training for officers and independent investigations into police misconduct. Isaiah's face appeared in articles and news segments, often alongside captions like "the boy who sparked a movement." Danielle shielded him from most of the coverage, but she couldn't prevent the whispers at school or the lingering stares at the grocery store. One afternoon, Isaiah confided in Danielle. "Why do they care so much about me, Mama?" Danielle knelt in front of him, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "Because what happened to you shouldn't happen to anyone," she said. "And because your story is helping people see what needs to change." The growing movement wasn't without backlash. Some residents argued that the incident was being overblown, while others defended Harlow, claiming he was being vilified for doing his job. One local business put up a sign reading, "We support our police. Stop the witch hunt." The sign sparked outrage, leading to a protest outside the store. Danielle decided not to attend, but Renee joined, delivering a fiery speech about the need for accountability. Isaiah, watching the protest on TV, felt a mix of emotions. He was proud of his aunt, but also overwhelmed by the attention. Determined to channel the public momentum into meaningful change, Danielle met with Marcus Turner, a lawyer from a civil rights organization. Together, they discussed filing a formal complaint against the police department, citing systemic bias. "This isn't just about one officer," Marcus said. "It's about a culture that allows these things to happen." Danielle agreed, though the thought of taking on the police department felt daunting. "What about Isaiah?" she asked. "I don't want this to hurt him more than it already has." "We'll protect him as much as we can," Marcus assured her. "But his story is powerful, Danielle. It can make a real difference." Despite Danielle's efforts to protect him, Isaiah couldn't escape the weight of the incident. At school, classmates bombarded him with questions. What was it like? Were you scared? Isaiah often didn't know how to answer. One day, after a particularly intrusive question, he snapped, yelling at a classmate and storming out of the room. When Danielle picked him up, his teacher, Miss Peterson, pulled her aside. "Isaiah's been having a hard time," she said gently. "I think he needs someone to talk to." That evening, Danielle sat with Isaiah on the couch. "Baby, would you want to talk to a counselor?" she asked. Isaiah shrugged. "I don't know. It's okay to need help," Danielle said softly. "You've been through a lot." After a long pause, Isaiah nodded. "Okay." While Isaiah began therapy, Harlow faced increasing isolation. His fellow officers were split. Some supported him, while others distanced themselves, wary of being associated with the controversy. Harlow's lawyer, Victor Graham, advised him to remain silent publicly, but prepared him for the possibility of a civil suit. "We'll argue that you acted within protocol," Graham said, "but you need to be ready for a fight." Harlow nodded, though a gnawing doubt had begun to creep into his mind. He replayed the encounter with Isaiah, wondering if there had been another way to handle it. One evening, Danielle took Isaiah back to the park, hoping to reclaim the space as a place of joy. This time, they brought along Isaiah's friend, Evan, who had been a source of support at school. The boys kicked the soccer ball back and forth, their laughter filling the air. For a moment, the park felt like it used to safe and full of possibility. As Danielle watched, she felt a glimmer of hope. Isaiah's resilience was a reminder of why she was fighting, not just for him, but for every child who deserved to grow up without fear. The Fairview Police Department launched an internal review of Officer Clint Harlow's actions after public pressure mounted. Lieutenant Sarah Boyd, head of internal affairs, was tasked with leading the inquiry. Lieutenant Boyd conducted interviews with Harlow and his colleagues. Harlow, though defensive, insisted he had done nothing wrong. "I acted based on my training," he repeated, his tone clipped. Boyd pressed him. "Do you feel your actions were appropriate, considering the child had done nothing to indicate he was a threat?" Harlow hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. I thought he might have been up to something. You never know these days." "That's the problem, Officer Harlow," Boyd replied, her tone sharp. "You acted on a hunch, not evidence. And that's not what we train for." Isaiah's first therapy session was quiet. He sat across from Dr. Amelia Pierce, a warm, soft-spoken therapist with a calm demeanor. She began with simple questions, asking about his favorite hobbies and school subjects. Isaiah was hesitant at first, answering with single words. But as the session progressed, Dr. Pierce gently encouraged him to share his feelings about the park incident. "I didn't do anything wrong," Isaiah said, his voice breaking. "But he looked at me like I was a bad kid." "That must have been really scary," Dr. Pierce said empathetically. Isaiah nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Why did he think that about me?" Dr. Pierce didn't offer a simple answer, knowing the truth was complex. Instead, she reassured him. "What happened wasn't your fault, Isaiah. Sometimes people make assumptions, and those assumptions are wrong. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you." Isaiah left the session feeling a little lighter. It was a small step, but an important one. As the investigation into Harlow continued, public opinion became increasingly polarized. Protests demanding accountability grew larger, with signs bearing slogans like "Justice for Isaiah" and "End Racial Profiling." Meanwhile, counter-protests emerged, with supporters of Harlow holding signs that read, "Support our police," and "Enough with the witch hunts." Danielle was careful to shield Isaiah from the more inflammatory rhetoric. However, she couldn't stop him from overhearing snippets of conversations or seeing headlines at the grocery store. One evening, as they watched TV together, Isaiah turned to his mother. "Why do some people think the officer was right?" Danielle sighed, struggling to find the right words. "Sometimes people don't want to admit when something is wrong," she said. "It's easier to defend the way things are than to work toward change." Isaiah thought about this for a moment before asking, "Do you think they'll ever listen?" "I think they will," Danielle said firmly. "Because people like you are showing them why they need to." Captain Denise Walker continued her efforts to push for reform within the department. She met with Chief Walter Simmons and other department heads, presenting recommendations for bias training and increased oversight. "This isn't just about one incident," Walker said during a meeting. "It's about rebuilding trust with the community." Chief Simmons, though initially resistant, began to see the writing on the wall. Public scrutiny wasn't going away, and ignoring the issue could have long-term consequences for the department. "I'll bring your recommendations to the city council," Simmons said reluctantly. "But you'd better be ready for pushback." "I've been ready," Walker replied. As word of Isaiah's story spread, his school invited him to speak at an assembly on fairness and respect. At first, Isaiah was hesitant. "What if I mess up?" he asked Danielle the night before. "You won't," Danielle assured him. "Just tell your story. That's all you need to do." Standing on the stage in front of his classmates, Isaiah's hands trembled. But when he began to speak, his voice grew steady. "I was just playing soccer at the park," he said, "and the officer thought I was doing something wrong, even though I wasn't. It made me feel small, like I didn't belong." He paused, glancing at the audience. "But my mom told me that wasn't true. And I want everyone to know it's okay to stand up for yourself. And it's okay to ask for help when things feel unfair." The students erupted into applause, and Isaiah felt a surge of pride. During his administrative leave, Harlow attended mandatory counseling sessions as part of the department's policy. At first, he resisted, treating the sessions as a formality. But during one session, his therapist asked, "Clint, why do you think you approached that boy in the park?" "I thought he might have been causing trouble," Harlow said defensively. "Why?" the therapist pressed. "What about him made you think that?" Harlow hesitated, uncomfortable with the question. "I don't know. Maybe Maybe I assumed because of how he looked. That assumption hurt him, the therapist said gently. And it's something worth thinking about. For the first time, Harlow began to question his actions. It was an uncomfortable realization, but it planted a seed of self-reflection. As the town hall meetings continued, the community began drafting a list of demands for the police department. These included mandatory bias training, independent oversight, and a review of past complaints against officers. Danielle, though hesitant to take on a public role, became a key figure in the movement. Her calm, articulate speeches resonated with both activists and city officials. "This isn't about punishing one officer," she said during a city council meeting. "It's about creating a system that protects everyone, especially our children." Isaiah's therapy sessions and the support of his family helped him regain his confidence. One afternoon, while playing soccer with his friend Evan, he shared something he hadn't admitted before. "I didn't want to go back to the park at first," Isaiah said. "I was scared he might come back." "But you did," Evan pointed out. "That's brave." Isaiah smiled, realizing his friend was right. "Yeah, I guess it is." The courtroom was packed on the first day of the hearing. Reporters jostled for seats, activists gathered outside, and the Morgan family sat quietly in the front row. Isaiah fidgeted beside Danielle, his nerves evident. The case wasn't criminal officer Clint Harlow faced a civil suit filed by Danielle with the support of a prominent civil rights organization. The lawsuit accused Harlow and the Fairview Police Department of negligence and racial bias, seeking accountability and systemic reform. Danielle's lawyer, Marcus Turner, delivered a powerful opening statement. "This is not about punishing one officer," he began. "This is about justice for Isaiah Morgan and every child who has ever felt less than safe because of assumptions based on their appearance." Harlow's defense attorney, Victor Graham, countered with a calculated argument. "Officer Harlow was acting within the bounds of his training," he said. "His intent was never malicious, and this case is a misrepresentation of his actions." The tension in the courtroom was palpable. The prosecution called its first witness, Ryan Cole, the bystander who had recorded the video. Ryan recounted what he had seen that day at the park. "The officer's tone was aggressive from the start," Ryan said. "Isaiah was just a kid playing soccer, and it was clear he hadn't done anything wrong." The defense tried to undermine Ryan's credibility, suggesting he had a bias against law enforcement. But Ryan remained steadfast. "This isn't about being against the police," he said firmly. "It's about standing up for what's right." Next, the prosecution called Captain Denise Walker, who testified about systemic issues within the department. "There's a lack of accountability," Walker said. "Complaints are often dismissed without proper investigation, which allows biases to persist unchecked." Her testimony was a damning indictment of the department's culture. When Isaiah was called to the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Danielle's heart pounded as she watched her son climb into the witness chair, his small frame dwarfed by its size. Marcus approached him gently. "Isaiah, can you tell us what happened that day at the park?" Isaiah hesitated, glancing at his mother before answering. "I was playing soccer," he said softly, "and the officer came over and started asking me questions. He sounded really mad." "What did you feel in that moment?" Marcus asked. "I felt scared," Isaiah admitted, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what I did wrong." The defense cross-examined Isaiah, attempting to cast doubt on his recollection of events. But Isaiah's quiet honesty was unshakable. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly. "I just wanted to play." When it was time for Clint Harlow to testify, he looked uneasy. His lawyer had coached him to stay calm and measured, but the weight of public scrutiny seemed to bear down on him. "I approached the boy because I thought something was off," Harlow said. "I've seen kids his age get into trouble before, and I didn't want anything to happen." Marcus pressed him. "What exactly about Isaiah seemed off to you, Officer Harlow?" Harlow struggled to answer. "He didn't look like most of the kids in the park." "And what do you mean by that?" Marcus asked, his tone sharp. Harlow shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Maybe I made a mistake." "Maybe," Marcus pressed. "Or did you assume something about Isaiah because of the color of his skin?" Harlow didn't respond, his silence speaking volumes. As the trial progressed, new evidence came to light. Marcus presented an internal memo from the police department that detailed previous complaints against Harlow, including allegations of racial bias. This memo shows that the department was aware of Officer Harlow's pattern of behavior and failed to act, Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. This isn't just about one incident, it's about a system that allowed it to happen. The defense scrambled to counter the revelation, but the damage was done. Marcus delivered a powerful closing argument, tying together the testimonies and evidence into a compelling narrative. This case isn't about destroying an officer's career, he said. It's about ensuring that no child has to grow up feeling like they don't belong in their own community. Isaiah Morgan was just a boy playing soccer, and yet he was treated like a suspect because of assumptions that have no place in a just society. Victor Graham, for the defense, leaned on the argument of reasonable doubt. Officer Harlow acted within the scope of his duties, he argued. While mistakes may have been made, they were not malicious. The jury listened intently, their expressions unreadable. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back in. Danielle held Isaiah's hand, her grip firm but comforting. The foreperson stood, her voice steady. On the charge of negligence, we find the defendant liable. On the charge of racial discrimination, we find the defendant liable. A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Danielle closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "We did it, baby." The verdict sparked widespread reactions. Activists celebrated the decision as a step toward accountability, while Harlow's supporters decried it as unfair. Harlow was dismissed from the police force and required to undergo extensive bias training and community service. The police department also agreed to implement reforms, including mandatory bias training and the creation of an independent oversight committee. For Isaiah, the journey wasn't over. He continued therapy to process the trauma, but the verdict gave him a sense of closure. One evening, as he and Danielle walked through the park, Isaiah paused by a newly installed plaque that read, "In honor of those who fight for justice and equality." He turned to his mother. "Do you think things will really change?" "They already are," Danielle said, her voice full of hope. As the trial gained national attention, the community of Fairview became a focal point for discussions about justice, equality, and systemic change. Outside the courthouse, activists held peaceful demonstrations. Signs reading "Justice for Isaiah" and "Accountability Now" dotted the landscape. Among the demonstrators was Pastor Lawrence Avery, who led a prayer circle each morning before proceedings began. "Let's remember," he told the crowd, "this fight is not about revenge. It's about creating a better world for all our children." Isaiah watched the news coverage from home, feeling a strange mix of pride and pressure. He turned to his mother. "What if they lose, Mama?" Danielle knelt beside him, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "Baby, we've already won in some ways," she said. "People are talking about things they used to ignore. That's because of you." Midway through the trial, Marcus Turner presented an unexpected witness, Harold Whitaker, a retired officer who had served in the same precinct as Clint Harlow. Whitaker's testimony would prove to be a turning point. Taking the stand, Whitaker looked weary but resolute. "I saw things during my years on the force," he began, "things that didn't sit right with me. And I regret not speaking up sooner." "What kind of things?" Marcus asked. Whitaker sighed, glancing briefly at Harlow. There were patterns: certain officers treating kids from minority communities differently. Harlow was one of them. "I reported it once, but it got buried. Nobody wanted to deal with the paperwork." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Whitaker's words reinforced the idea that Harlow's actions weren't isolated but part of a broader issue. The defense tried to discredit Whitaker, suggesting he was biased or bitter. But Whitaker remained steadfast. "I'm here because it's the right thing to do," he said, "and it's long overdue." While the trial continued, Isaiah attended another session with Dr. Amelia Pierce. This time, they worked on building Isaiah's confidence. Dr. Pierce asked him to draw what he felt when he was at the park that day. Isaiah sketched himself, small and alone, with a large shadow looming over him. "That's how it felt," he explained quietly. "Like I didn't matter." Dr. Pierce nodded. "That's a powerful image, Isaiah. But let's think about something. Who are the people who remind you that you do matter?" Isaiah thought for a moment before adding figures to the drawing: his mother, his Aunt Renee, and a group of friends standing beside him. That's who you have behind you, Dr. Pierce said. And no shadow is bigger than their love and support. Victor Graham, Harlow's defense attorney, took an aggressive stance during cross-examinations. He attempted to paint the incident as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by social media. Isn't it true, Graham asked one witness, that Officer Harlow never physically harmed Isaiah Morgan? Yes, the witness admitted. And isn't it possible, Graham continued, that Harlow was simply trying to ensure the safety of the park? The witness hesitated, but Marcus Turner objected. This line of questioning assumes intentions we can't verify, he said. The judge agreed, and Graham moved on, though it was clear he aimed to sow doubt in the jury's minds. On the final day of testimonies, Danielle took the stand. As a respected judge, her words carried weight, but as a mother, her emotions were raw. Mrs. Morgan, Marcus began, can you describe the impact this incident has had on your son? Danielle paused, steadying her voice. Isaiah is a bright, loving child. He's always been curious and full of joy. But after that day, something changed. He became quieter, more hesitant. He questioned his own worth. She glanced at Isaiah, who watched from the gallery, his hands folded in his lap. No child should feel that way, she said, her voice trembling. And no parent should have to explain to their child why they were treated differently just because of how they look. Her testimony was met with silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Marcus Turner delivered a closing argument that tied together the testimonies, evidence, and the heart of the case. This is not just about one child or one officer, he said, pacing in front of the jury. This is about a system that has allowed bias to go unchecked for too long. Isaiah Morgan's story is a wake-up call, and this courtroom has the power to say, enough is enough. Victor Graham, on the other hand, leaned on the defense's narrative. Officer Harlow made a judgment call, he argued. It may not have been perfect, but it was not malicious. We cannot condemn a man for doing his job under difficult circumstances. The jury listened intently, their expressions neutral but focused. As the jury deliberated, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Outside, crowds gathered, holding their breath alongside the Morgan family. Isaiah clutched Danielle's hand tightly. What if they don't believe us? He whispered. Danielle leaned down to him, her voice steady. No matter what happens, we told the truth. And that's what matters. Hours later, the jury returned. The foreperson's voice rang out. On the charge of negligence, we find the defendant liable. On the charge of racial discrimination, we find the defendant liable. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps and murmurs. Danielle hugged Isaiah tightly, tears streaming down her face. Harlow sat silently as the verdict was read. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he barely responded. The weight of the decision settled on him like a stone. For the first time, Harlow seemed to grasp the gravity of his actions not just for himself, but for the boy he had wronged. The jury's decision made headlines across the nation. Justice for Isaiah, a landmark verdict in Fairview, read one newspaper. On social media, the hashtags Justice for Isaiah and accountability now trended for days. For Danielle and Isaiah, the aftermath brought both relief and reflection. That evening, as they sat together on the couch, Isaiah clutched a framed photo of himself playing soccer, a reminder of the innocence that had been shaken but not destroyed. Mama, does this mean everything's fixed now? Isaiah asked, his voice tinged with both hope and skepticism. Danielle smiled gently. It's a step in the right direction, baby, but there's still more work to do. Officer Clint Harlow's dismissal from the Fairview Police Department was finalized shortly after the verdict. He was also ordered to complete community service and mandatory bias training as part of the settlement agreement. At first, Harlow bristled at the requirements, viewing them as an unjust punishment. But during one of his training sessions, something shifted. The instructor showed a series of videos depicting interactions between officers and civilians, including one that mirrored Isaiah's experience. As Harlow watched the reenactment, he saw himself in the officer's actions and Isaiah in the boy's frightened eyes. For the first time, he began to understand the impact of his behavior. After the session, Harlow stayed behind to speak with the instructor. How do you change something that's been part of you for so long? he asked quietly. You start by admitting there's a problem, the instructor replied. And then you listen. Really listen. Isaiah continued attending therapy with Dr. Amelia Pierce, who used creative exercises to help him process his emotions. One afternoon, she asked him to write a letter to the officer. You don't have to send it, she said. This is just for you. Isaiah hesitated, but eventually began to write. Dear Officer Harlow, you made me feel small and scared like I didn't belong. But I know now that it wasn't my fault. It was yours. I hope you learn to see kids like me for who we really are, not what you think we might be. When he finished, Isaiah folded the letter and tucked it into his therapy journal. It wasn't closure, but it was a step forward. With the case behind her, Danielle channeled her energy into systemic reform. She partnered with Captain Denise Walker and local leaders to push for changes within the Fairview Police Department. At a community forum, Danielle spoke passionately about the need for accountability. Justice isn't just about one verdict, she said. It's about creating a system where every child feels safe, every family feels heard, and every officer is held to the highest standard. Her words resonated, drawing support from both residents and city officials. In the weeks following the trial, the park where the incident occurred underwent a transformation. With funds raised by the community, new equipment was installed, and a mural was painted on the side of the nearby recreation center. The mural depicted children of all races playing together under a bright, hopeful sky. At its center was a quote, "Every child deserves to feel safe." At the grand reopening ceremony, Isaiah and Danielle were invited to cut the ribbon. As Isaiah ran onto the field with his soccer ball, the crowd cheered, and Danielle felt a swell of pride. Community reforms begin. Under pressure from both the public and city leaders, the Fairview Police Department implemented a series of reforms. Mandatory bias training. All officers were required to complete annual sessions focusing on cultural sensitivity and implicit bias. Independent Oversight Committee. A civilian-led board was established to review complaints against officers. Youth Engagement Program. Officers were encouraged to participate in community events to build trust with local children and families. Captain Denise Walker was promoted to a leadership role, where she continued to advocate for meaningful change. We can't undo the past, she said during a press conference, but we can work toward a better future. As the weeks turned into months, Isaiah began to rediscover his joy. He returned to playing soccer with his friends, his laughter echoing through the park once more. One day, Danielle found him practicing in the backyard. You're getting really good, she said, watching as he dribbled the ball with newfound confidence. Isaiah grinned. Maybe I'll be a pro someday. You already are in my eyes, Danielle replied, her heart swelling with pride. One afternoon, Danielle received a letter in the mail. It was from Clint Harlow. Dear Mrs. Morgan, I want to apologize for the pain I caused you and your son. I've spent a lot of time reflecting, and I realize now that my actions were wrong. I'm committed to learning and doing better. I know I can't undo what happened, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. Danielle read the letter twice before folding it carefully and placing it in her desk drawer. She wasn't ready to respond, but the gesture gave her a glimmer of hope that change was possible even in the most unlikely places. Months later, Isaiah was invited to speak at a youth leadership conference. Standing on the stage, he faced an audience of peers and adults, his nerves a distant memory. I was just a kid playing soccer, he began. But that day taught me something important. Our voices matter. Even when we're scared, even when it feels like no one's listening, we have to keep speaking up. The crowd erupted into applause, and Danielle wiped away tears as she watched her son stand tall. Years later, Isaiah returned to the park as a young man. Now a mentor for local youth, he often shared his story to inspire others. Standing before a plaque bearing his name, he smiled, remembering the journey that had brought him there. It wasn't easy, he said to a group of wide-eyed kids, but it was worth it, and so are you. Danielle, watching from a distance, felt a profound sense of peace. Together, she and Isaiah had turned pain into purpose, ensuring that their story would continue to inspire change for generations to come. A year after the verdict, the Morgan family and the Fairview community had settled into a new rhythm. Though the sting of the incident lingered, the strides made toward justice and reform were undeniable. Isaiah, now 11, had grown noticeably more confident. His smile was back, and his laughter rang out freely as he played soccer in the park. Danielle watched him from a bench, her heart swelling with pride. She had taken a brief sabbatical from her role as a judge to focus on community advocacy, spending time working with local leaders and families affected by systemic injustices. The transition had been difficult, but it felt right. The changes implemented within the Fairview Police Department were beginning to show results. Officers were seen walking through neighborhoods, greeting residents by name, and attending local events. Captain Denise Walker had spearheaded these initiatives. "Trust is earned, not demanded," she often said. "And we're starting from scratch." The Youth Engagement Program, in particular, became a cornerstone of the department's efforts. Officers coached sports teams, hosted workshops, and mentored children. For many kids in Fairview, the presence of officers at these events felt less like an intrusion and more like an opportunity to connect. Isaiah occasionally attended these events, his initial wariness slowly giving way to cautious optimism. At school, Isaiah's teachers noticed a shift in him. Once quiet and hesitant, he now volunteered to lead group projects and spoke with conviction during class discussions. One day, his teacher, Ms. Peterson, asked him to help organize a diversity and inclusion day for the school. Isaiah embraced the task wholeheartedly, collaborating with classmates to plan activities and presentations. During the event, Isaiah gave a short speech. "It's not about how we look or where we come from," he said. "It's about how we treat each other, and we all deserve respect." His words earned him a standing ovation, and several students approached him afterward, sharing their own stories of feeling unseen or misunderstood. One evening, Danielle received a second letter from Clint Harlow. Unlike the first, this one was addressed to both her and Isaiah. "Dear Danielle and Isaiah, I've spent the past year reflecting on my actions and the harm they caused. I've learned a lot through training and conversations with people who helped me see things differently. Isaiah, I want you to know that you taught me something important. Assumptions hurt people. I hope one day you can forgive me, but even if you don't, I want you to know I am truly sorry. Sincerely, Clint Harlow." Danielle read the letter aloud to Isaiah, who listened intently. When she finished, she looked at her son. "What do you think, baby?" Isaiah was quiet for a moment. "I think it's good he's trying," he said, "but I don't know if I'm ready to forgive him." "That's okay," Danielle said, pulling him close. "Forgiveness is a choice, and it takes time." Later that summer, the city of Fairview hosted a dedication ceremony to celebrate the park's transformation. The newly renovated space now featured a community garden, additional playground equipment, and a plaque commemorating the movement for justice sparked by Isaiah's story. Isaiah was invited to give a short speech. Standing before the crowd, he felt a familiar nervousness but pushed through it, his voice clear and steady. "A year ago, I didn't know how to stand up for myself," he began. "But now I know that speaking up is the first step to making things better. This park is a place where kids like me should feel safe, and I hope it stays that way for everyone." The crowd erupted in applause, and Danielle, standing nearby, felt tears prick her eyes. As the months went on, Danielle continued her work in advocacy, mentoring young lawyers and activists. She also helped create a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in social justice. At one of her workshops, a young mother approached her with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up for my son," she said. "Thank you for everything you've done." Danielle nodded, her heart full. "It's not just my story," she replied. "It's all of ours, and we have to keep writing it together." Now a middle schooler, Isaiah began exploring his interests beyond soccer. He joined the debate team and discovered a knack for public speaking, often drawing on his experiences to inspire others. One afternoon, he came home and announced, "Mama, I think I want to be a lawyer when I grow up like Mr. Turner." Danielle smiled, pulling him into a hug. "I think you'd be amazing at it," she said, "and I'll be right here to cheer you on." Years later, Isaiah, now in high school, visited the park with his friends. As they played soccer, a younger boy approached him, asking shyly, "Can I play too?" "Of course," Isaiah said with a grin, passing the ball to the boy. From a distance, Danielle watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with pride. Isaiah had come full circle, not just as a survivor of injustice, but as a leader, a mentor, and a symbol of resilience. Danielle often thought back to the day at the park that changed everything. While the pain of that moment would never fully disappear, she knew it had sparked something bigger, a movement that extended beyond her family and into the broader community. And for Isaiah, the experience had shaped him into a young man who understood the power of his voice. As Danielle and Isaiah walked home from the park that evening, the sky painted in hues of orange and gold, Isaiah turned to his mother. "Do you think people will ever stop judging each other?" Danielle placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice full of hope. "I think we can get there, baby. One step at a time." Thank you for watching this story of resilience, hope, and the power of change. If this message inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more stories that uplift and inspire. Together, we can continue to share voices that matter and work toward a better future. Thank you for being part of this journey. Jamal, a young boy whose small act of kindness toward a struggling elderly man sets off a chain reaction that changes his life and his entire neighborhood in ways he could never have imagined. When a mysterious black car pulls up in front of his house, it's the beginning of a journey filled with unexpected challenges, whispers of suspicion, and a gift that holds the power to transform everything. But how does Jamal navigate the tensions in his community? And what will he and his family do when faced with a choice that could alter their future forever? Stick around to uncover this heartwarming tale of resilience, unity, and the power of one good deed. If you enjoy stories about hope and transformation, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Let us know in the comments what you think of Jamal's journey, and share your own stories of kindness and connection. Now let's dive in. Jamal Carter sat on the front steps of his house, his legs stretched out over the cracked concrete. The late summer sun bore down on the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. Kids were playing 2 blocks over, their shouts carrying faintly through the air, but Jamal wasn't in the mood to join them today. He bounced a battered basketball against the step, the rhythmic thud giving him something to focus on. At 13, Jamal already felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. His wiry frame hinted at how active he was, constantly on the move to help his family. Though his friends teased him for being all bones, Jamal's quick reflexes and determined nature were his quiet strengths. The basketball slipped out of his hands and rolled into the dirt, but Jamal didn't bother retrieving it. He wiped the sweat off his brow with the sleeve of his too small t-shirt, its faded blue fabric clinging to his skin. Behind him, the front door creaked open, and his little brother, Emmett, poked his head out. "Jamal, Mama says come inside." Emmett's voice was high-pitched, and there was a slight wobble in it. Jamal sighed, knowing what that tone meant. "I'm coming," he called back, standing and brushing the dust from his shorts. Inside the house, the air was stuffy and hot. A rickety fan sat in the corner of the living room, oscillating uselessly as it pushed the heat from one side of the room to the other. His youngest sibling, Sophia, was sprawled on the floor near the fan, trying to stay cool. Her crayons were scattered across the carpet, a half-colored drawing of a house in front of her. Lydia Carter, their mother, was at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. She looked up when Jamal entered, her tired eyes softening slightly. "Baby, can you run to the corner store for me? I need some flour and sugar." "Just enough for the week," she said, her voice low and weary. Jamal nodded, already reaching for the grocery list and the crumpled dollar bills she was holding out. He didn't miss the way her hands shook slightly as she handed them over. "Everything okay, Ma?" he asked hesitantly. Lydia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's fine, baby. Just go on before it gets dark." Jamal knew better than to push. He stuffed the money into his pocket and grabbed the canvas bag hanging by the door. The corner store was a 10-minute walk, but Jamal took his time, kicking a loose rock down the sidewalk as he went. The neighborhood was familiar, even comforting in its shabbiness. Rows of houses lined the street, their paint peeling and porches sagging. People sat outside on their stoops, chatting in low voices or simply watching the world go by. Jamal, called Mrs. Henderson from across the street. She was leaning against her front gate, a cigarette dangling from her lips. Hey, Mrs. Henderson, Jamal replied, waving. You tell your mama I said hi, okay? Yes, ma'am. The corner store came into view, its neon sign flickering. Inside, Mr. Patel stood behind the counter, ringing up a young woman's groceries. He glanced up when Jamal entered and gave him a small nod. Afternoon, Jamal. Here to help your mama again? Yeah, Jamal said, heading to the back of the store to grab the flour and sugar. He added a carton of eggs to the mix, knowing Lydia would make them stretch over the week. At the counter, Mr. Patel rang up the items and slid a candy bar across the counter as he packed the bag. For Sophia, he said with a wink. Jamal hesitated, then pocketed the candy. Thanks, Mr. Patel. Tell your mama I said hello. Back home, the mood was heavier than before. Lydia was still at the table, her brow furrowed as she flipped through a stack of papers. Rent's late again, she muttered under her breath, barely noticing Jamal as he set the groceries down on the counter. Emmett and Sophia were arguing over the crayons when Jamal knelt beside them. Hey, cut it out, he said, pulling the candy bar from his pocket. Sophia, this is for you. But you gotta share, okay? Sophia's eyes lit up, and Emmett immediately stopped whining at the sight of the chocolate. Jamal ruffled their hair before standing and turning his attention back to the kitchen. What's going on, Ma? He asked, his voice low. Lydia sighed, rubbing her temples. Mr. Murdoch came by earlier. Gave us a week to pay, or she trailed off, but Jamal didn't need her to finish. He'd seen the eviction notices before. The knock on the door came the next afternoon, sharp and insistent. Lydia stiffened at the sound, her eyes darting toward Jamal. Get the door, baby, she said quietly. Jamal nodded, his stomach tightening as he approached. Peeking through the curtain, he saw Mr. Murdoch standing on the porch, his usual frown etched deep into his face. Your mama Holmes? Murdoch asked when Jamal opened the door. Yes, sir, Jamal replied, stepping aside to let him in. Lydia came to the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Mr. Murdoch, she said, her tone polite but strained. You know why I'm here, he said. I do, Lydia said, and I just need a little more time. I'm expecting something soon. I can get you the money by next week. Murdoch sighed, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. You've got until Friday. No more extensions, Lydia. I'm running a business here. Jamal clenched his fists at the way Murdoch spoke, but he kept quiet. When the door finally shut behind the landlord, the tension in the room didn't dissipate. That evening, Jamal went to the empty lot where he and his friends usually played soccer. The deflated ball didn't bother them. They'd been kicking it around for years. Malik, Jamal's best friend, was already there, juggling the ball with his knees. You're late, Malik teased, tossing the ball to Jamal. Had stuff to do, Jamal replied, dribbling the ball across the dirt. The game was a welcome distraction, but as the sun began to set, something caught Jamal's eye. Across the street, an elderly man struggled to lift a large wooden box into the trunk of a sleek black car. His frail frame bent under the weight, and Jamal's heart tugged. Be right back, he called to Malik, jogging toward the man. Hey, mister, Jamal said, need a hand? The old man looked up, surprised, before a grateful smile spread across his face. That would be wonderful, son. Thank you. The box was heavier than Jamal expected, but he managed to hoist it into the trunk with the man's help. When they finished, the man placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. You're a good kid, he said. Not many would stop to help. Jamal shrugged, feeling embarrassed. It's nothing. The old man chuckled softly before climbing into the car. As it drove away, its taillights fading into the distance, Jamal felt a strange sense of pride. The next day, the sleek black car reappeared, but this time, it was parked in front of Jamal's house. Jamal froze on the sidewalk, his grocery bag slipping slightly from his grasp. The driver's door opened, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He was younger than the man Jamal had helped, with sharp features and an air of authority. You must be Jamal Carter, the man said, offering a hand. I'm Connor Hargrove. My father told me about you. Jamal shook his hand cautiously. Oh. Connor smiled. He wanted me to thank you personally. My father doesn't forget kindness like that. Tell him it's no big deal, Jamal said quickly, already feeling uncomfortable. Actually, he'd like to thank you in person, Connor continued. Would you and your family be willing to visit our home? It would mean a lot to him. Jamal hesitated, glancing at the house. I don't know. I'd have to ask my mom. Of course, Connor said, handing him a sleek business card. Please let her know we'd be happy to host you. My father's a bit old-fashioned. He believes in gratitude. As the car drove away, Jamal stared at the card in his hand, the weight of the gesture sinking in. Jamal handed the sleek black business card to his mom later that evening. Lydia stared at it for a long moment, turning it over in her hand. The card was pristine, the name Connor Hargrove printed in elegant lettering with a phone number below. And he just gave this to you? Lydia asked, her tone skeptical. Jamal nodded, sitting at the kitchen table. He said his dad wanted to thank me, for helping him with that box. Lydia exhaled deeply, setting the card down. I don't know, Jamal. People like that don't usually come around here unless they want something. They don't seem like bad people, Ma, Jamal said hesitantly. The old man seemed nice. And the son, Connor, he said it was just to show gratitude. Lydia's lips pressed into a thin line. I'll think about it. The next day, Lydia called Connor Hargrove, her tone measured and polite as she arranged a time for their visit. Jamal could hear the tension in her voice, the way she carefully chose her words. When she hung up, she sighed heavily. We'll go, she said, but we won't stay long. Jamal nodded, sensing her unease but also feeling a spark of curiosity. The Hargrove estate was unlike anything Jamal had ever seen. As Connor drove them through the gates in the same sleek black car, Jamal marveled at the sprawling lawns and towering oak trees. The driveway seemed to stretch forever, lined with neatly trimmed hedges. Is this his house? Emmett whispered, his nose pressed against the car window. This is his property, Lydia corrected softly, her voice tinged with awe. When the mansion came into view, even Lydia couldn't hide her surprise. The house was massive, its white columns gleaming in the sunlight. It looked like something out of a magazine, the kind Jamal had flipped through at the library. Connor opened the car door for them and gestured toward the entrance. Please come in. My father's waiting for you. The interior of the house was just as impressive as the outside. The floors were polished wood, and the ceilings soared high, adorned with intricate chandeliers. Lydia gripped Sophia's hand tightly, as if afraid her youngest child might accidentally knock something over. An elderly butler greeted them at the door, leading them into a sitting room where Walter Hargrove waited. The old man looked even frielier than Jamal remembered, his thin frame almost swallowed by the armchair he sat in. But his face lit up when he saw Jamal. There he is, Walter said, his voice warm. My young hero. Jamal shuffled awkwardly, his cheeks burning. I just helped you with a box, sir. Walter chuckled. That's more than most people would have done. Sit, please. They sat on a plush couch, Lydia's posture stiff and wary. Walter gestured toward a small tray of snacks and drinks on the coffee table. Help yourselves, he said. Jamal reached for a cookie, encouraged by Walter's friendly smile, but Lydia declined, her hands resting tightly in her lap. We're grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Hargrove, Lydia said, her tone polite but cautious. But we don't want to impose. Nonsense, Walter replied. Your son's kindness meant more to me than you know, and I wanted to thank him and your whole family properly. He nodded toward Connor, who stepped forward holding an envelope. Walter gestured for Jamal to take it. Jamal hesitated, looking at Lydia for guidance. She gave him a slight nod, though her jaw tightened. Inside the envelope was a stack of crisp bills. Jamal's eyes widened, and he quickly handed it to Lydia. Mr. Hargrove, this is very generous, but Lydia began, her voice faltering. Walter held up a hand. Please, it's the least I can do. You're raising a fine young man, Miss Carter, and I want to help in any way I can. Lydia stared at the money for a long moment before carefully tucking it back into the envelope. Thank you, she said quietly. As they prepared to leave, Jamal lingered in the hallway, his gaze drawn to a door slightly ajar. Inside, he glimpsed a room filled with ornate furniture, paintings, and sculptures. Everything looked old and expensive, the kind of stuff Jamal had only ever seen in museums. Curious, aren't you? Connor's voice made Jamal jump. Sorry, Jamal mumbled, stepping back. Connor smiled faintly. That's just some of my father's collection. Family heirlooms, mostly. He's very sentimental about them. Jamal nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The ride home was quiet. Emmett and Sophia dozed off in the back seat, their heads resting against each other. Lydia sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the envelope as if it might vanish. When they pulled up to their house, Lydia turned to Jamal. Go inside with your siblings. I'll be in soon. Jamal obeyed, though he glanced back at her as she sat alone in the car, staring at the envelope. That night, as they ate a simple dinner of rice and beans, Lydia spoke up. We'll use the money to pay the rent, she said firmly, and maybe fix a few things around here. But I don't want anyone in this neighborhood knowing about it. Understood? Jamal nodded. Yes, Ma. Emmett and Sophia, too young to fully grasp the weight of the conversation, simply nodded along. Lydia's gaze softened as she looked at her children. I just want us to have a little peace, she said quietly. That's all. The next morning, Jamal woke early to find Lydia sitting at the kitchen table, a notebook and pen in front of her. She was making a list: rent, groceries, repairs, each item carefully written with neat precision. Morning, baby, she said without looking up. Morning, Ma, Jamal replied, pouring himself a glass of water. Thank you, Lydia said suddenly, her voice soft. For what? Jamal asked, surprised. For being you, she said simply, her eyes meeting his. Jamal smiled, the warmth of her words settling over him. For the first time in months, there was a sense of relief in the Carter household. The envelope of money Walter Hargrove had given them wasn't just a gift, it was a lifeline. Lydia paid off their overdue rent immediately, ensuring Mr. Murdoch wouldn't be back with more threats. She also bought paint to brighten the dull, faded walls inside their home and scheduled a repairman to patch the leaky roof. Jamal watched the changes unfold with a mix of pride and unease. The money brought a measure of peace to his mom's usually furrowed brow, but it also made him feel like they were walking a fine line. His mother had made it clear they wouldn't rely on anyone else for their survival, but he couldn't ignore how much this help had already done. On Saturday morning, Jamal stood outside with a roller in hand, spreading fresh paint over the weathered siding of their house. Malik wandered over, his hands shoved in his pockets. Yo, Jamal, your place is looking nice, Malik said, kicking at a loose stone on the sidewalk. What's up with that? Jamal shrugged, focusing on the paint. Just trying to fix it up. Mom said it was time. Yeah, but how? Malik pressed, narrowing his eyes. Y'all win the lottery or something? Jamal hesitated. Nah, just got some help. Malik's curiosity deepened. From who? Jamal shook his head, brushing him off. It's nothing, Malik. Let it go. But Malik didn't let it go. That afternoon, when Jamal walked to the corner store, Malik tagged along, peppering him with questions. I don't get it, man. You've been doing all right, but now you're fixing the roof, painting the house. What gives? Drop it, Jamal said firmly, stepping inside the store. The whispers in the neighborhood started soon after. Mrs. Henderson mentioned the new paint job to Mr. Patel, who casually brought it up to another neighbor. It wasn't long before the entire block was talking about how the Carters were suddenly improving their home. Jamal could feel the change when he walked down the street. People lingered longer on their porches, their eyes following him as he passed. Some offered polite nods or hesitant smiles, but others turned away, their expressions tight. You see Mrs. Hill looking at us? Emmett asked one day as they walked home from school. Jamal glanced across the street. Mrs. Hill stood on her porch, watering her plants, but her gaze was fixed on them. She's just nosy, Jamal said, trying to reassure his brother. But inside, he couldn't shake the growing discomfort. Despite the improvements at home, trouble wasn't far behind. A week after Lydia paid the rent, Mr. Murdoch stopped by unexpectedly. He knocked sharply on the door, his usual scowl in place. What now? Lydia muttered as she opened the door. Murdoch handed her an envelope without saying a word. Lydia opened it, her face tightening as she read the notice inside. What is it, Ma? Jamal asked, stepping closer. Rent increase, Lydia said through clenched teeth. Starting next month. Jamal's stomach dropped. Can he even do that? He can, Lydia said bitterly. And he knows we can't fight it. The increase wasn't massive, but it was enough to undo the fragile stability they'd gained. Lydia spent the next few days reworking her budget, cutting out anything non-essential. The repairs to the house would have to wait, and groceries would be stretched even thinner. Jamal couldn't ignore the sense of helplessness creeping back in. He spent more time outside, playing soccer with Malik or helping neighbors with small errands to distract himself. But even as he tried to focus on the present, the shadow of their financial struggles loomed over him. One evening, as Jamal sat on the porch, Connor Hargrove's sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Jamal tensed, glancing inside the house. Lydia was in the kitchen, and he knew she wouldn't be happy about Connor's unexpected visit. "Evening, Jamal," Connor said, stepping out of the car. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "No, it's fine," Jamal said, though his tone wasn't convincing. Connor studied him for a moment before speaking. "My father's been asking about you. He's not doing well, but he remembers you fondly. He wanted me to see how you and your family were doing." Jamal shifted uncomfortably. "We're doing okay." Connor nodded. "Good. If you ever need anything, you know where to find us." Before Jamal could respond, Lydia appeared at the door, her expression tight. "Everything all right out here?" Connor offered her a polite smile. "Just checking in, Ms. Carter. My father's fond of your son, and we wanted to make sure you were all right." "We're fine," Lydia said curtly. "Thank you for stopping by." Connor hesitated, his gaze flicking to Jamal. "Take care, then." He climbed back into the car, and Jamal watched as it disappeared down the street. Later that night, Lydia pulled Jamal aside. "I told you to stay away from them," she said, her voice low but firm. "I didn't ask him to come, Ma," Jamal said defensively. "He just showed up." Lydia sighed, rubbing her temples. "They're not part of our world, Jamal. People like that don't just give, they expect something in return. And we can't afford to owe them." "I get it, Ma," Jamal said quietly. But deep down, he wasn't sure he could fully agree. The tension in the Carter household grew as Lydia tightened their budget to accommodate the rent increase. Meals became simpler, and Emmett and Sophia learned not to ask for extras. Jamal took on more small jobs around the neighborhood, helping Mr. Green clean his yard and delivering groceries for Mrs. Henderson. But even as they scraped by, the whispers in the neighborhood persisted. Some neighbors congratulated the Carters on their efforts to improve their home, while others speculated about where the money was coming from. "They've got connections," someone muttered to Mr. Patel one afternoon. "That's why they're fixing up so fast." "Connections? Like who?" "I heard about a fancy car coming by their house." "Don't tell me that's normal." One afternoon, Jamal found Malik waiting for him at the empty lot where they usually played soccer. "You okay, me?" Malik asked as they kicked the ball back and forth. "Yeah," Jamal said, though his tone betrayed him. "Come on, Jamal. Spill it. You've been acting weird." Jamal hesitated, then sighed. "It's just things at home. People talking, money being tight. It's a lot." Malik nodded. "Yeah, I get it. But people are always going to talk. You just got to do your thing, you know?" Jamal smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe." That evening, as Jamal sat on the porch, he saw Mrs. Henderson approaching with a grocery cart. She waved, her smile warm as she stopped at the gate. "Evening, Jamal," she said. "Your place is looking nice. Your mama must be proud." "Thanks, Mrs. Henderson," Jamal said, his chest swelling slightly with pride. She patted his arm. "You tell her she's doing a great job. All right?" Jamal nodded, watching as she continued down the street. Her kind words lingered, a small reminder that not everyone was suspicious. 2 weeks after Connor Hargrove's unexpected visit, the strain in the Carter household was beginning to show. The fresh paint and repaired roof hadn't gone unnoticed by the neighborhood, but instead of bringing pride, the changes brought questions. Whispers turned into pointed stares, and Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched every time he stepped outside. One afternoon, as Jamal walked home from the corner store, he spotted Mrs. Hill standing on her porch with a group of neighbors. Their conversation quieted as he passed, their eyes following him until he turned the corner. When he got home, Emmett and Sophia were playing quietly in the living room, a stark contrast to their usual lively antics. Jamal set the groceries on the counter and found Lydia sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming against the wood. "Ma, you okay?" Jamal asked, unpacking the groceries. Lydia looked up, her expression weary. "I ran into Mrs. Hill earlier. She asked me where we got the money to fix the roof." Jamal froze, the bag of rice slipping from his hand onto the counter. "What did you say?" "I told her it was none of her business," Lydia said firmly, but her voice wavered. "But Jamal, people are talking, and I don't like the way they're looking at us." "It's just jealousy," Jamal muttered, but even as he said it, he felt a pang of doubt. Lydia sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Jealousy or not, we can't afford to draw attention. This neighborhood, it's not kind of people who seem like they're getting ahead." Jamal swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had never thought of their small improvements as a threat, but now he wondered if their success was painting a target on their backs. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jamal sat on the porch, his thoughts swirling. The warm breeze carried the distant sound of kids playing, but the usual comfort of the neighborhood felt absent. Malik appeared out of nowhere, plopping down beside him. "Yo, what's up with you lately?" Jamal shrugged. "Nothing. Come on, man. I know you better than that. You're stressing about something." Jamal hesitated, then said, "It's just people. They're talking about us, about how we're fixing the house and all." Malik raised an eyebrow. "So what? Let them talk. You're doing something good, and they're just mad it's not them." "It's not that simple," Jamal said, his voice low. "It never is," Malik replied, leaning back on the steps. "But you can't let them get in your head. If I did that, I'd never get off my porch." Jamal chuckled despite himself. "Yeah, maybe you're right." "Of course I'm right," Malik said, grinning. "Now come on, let's hit the lot before it gets dark." The empty lot had always been a refuge for Jamal and his friends. That night, it was filled with laughter and the thud of their deflated soccer ball. For a few hours, Jamal forgot about the whispers, the rent increase, and the strange tension in the air. But as they walked home, the shadows of the neighborhood seemed darker than usual. Jamal's stomach tightened when he saw a black car parked a few houses down from his own. "Isn't that the car from before?" Malik asked, his voice cautious. Jamal nodded, his pulse quickening. The car's sleek design stood out starkly against the worn-down homes. He thought about Connor's last visit and wondered if he had returned. When Jamal got closer, his mom stepped out onto the porch, her arms crossed. "What's going on?" she called, her voice sharp. "I don't know," Jamal replied, climbing the steps. The driver's door opened, and Connor Hargrove emerged, looking slightly disheveled. His usual composed demeanor was replaced by something more urgent. "Miss Carter," Connor began, his tone apologetic, "I'm sorry to show up unannounced again. But my father, he's not well. He's been asking for Jamal." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "What does he want with my son?" Connor hesitated. He wants to see him, to thank him properly." Lydia's jaw tightened. "He already thanked us? More than enough." "I know," Connor said quickly. "But my father's health is failing, and he's made it clear this is important to him. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't." Jamal looked between Connor and his mom, his stomach churning. He didn't want to go, but the thought of refusing an old man's dying wish gnawed at him. "Ma," Jamal said quietly, "maybe I should go, just for a little while." Lydia turned to him, her eyes searching his face. After a long pause, she sighed. "If you're going, I'm coming with you." Connor nodded. "Of course. We'll leave whenever you're ready." The ride to the Hargrove estate was tense. Lydia sat with her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Jamal glanced at her occasionally, wishing he could ease her worry. When they arrived, the house looked even more imposing than before, its white columns stark against the night sky. Walter was waiting for them in the sitting room, his frail frame seeming even smaller in the large armchair. "Jamal," Walter said, his voice rasping. "Thank you for coming." Jamal sat across from him, Lydia standing protectively nearby. "Of course, sir," Jamal said, his voice hesitant. Walter smiled faintly. "I won't keep you long. I just wanted to tell you what you did for me. That small act of kindness reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. Hope." Jamal's throat tightened. He wasn't used to people speaking to him like this, with so much sincerity. Walter gestured toward Connor, who handed Jamal a small wooden box. Inside is something I'd like you to have. You and your family. Jamal hesitated, glancing at Lydia. She nodded reluctantly, and Jamal opened the box. Inside was a simple brass key. What's this for? Jamal asked, confused. Connor stepped forward. It opens a room in the estate. My father would like you to see what's inside. Lydia's eyes narrowed. Why? What's in there? Nothing dangerous, I assure you, Walter said. Just something I no longer need. Something that might help you. Jamal and Lydia followed Connor to the room, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. When they reached the door, Jamal used the key to unlock it. Inside, the room was filled with shelves of antiques paintings, sculptures, and ornate furniture. Lydia's breath caught. This is too much, she said. Walter's voice drifted from the doorway. Take what you need. Sell it, keep it, do whatever you want. Just promise me you'll use it well. That night, as they drove home with a few carefully chosen items, Jamal felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. The Hargroves had given them a chance to change their lives, but the weight of that chance felt heavier than ever. The morning after their visit to the Hargrove estate, the Carter household felt heavier than usual. Lydia sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood as she stared at the brass key now sitting in the middle of the table. It's too much, she muttered. Jamal sat across from her, his hands folded in his lap. Ma, it's not like they forced it on us. Mr. Hargrove, just he wanted to help? Lydia sighed, leaning back in her chair. Help isn't free, Jamal, and it's never this generous. Jamal wanted to argue, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had lingered since they left the estate. The ornate furniture, the priceless paintings, it all felt surreal, like a weight he wasn't sure he was ready to carry. We don't have to keep it all, Jamal offered. Maybe just sell enough to get by. Lydia nodded slowly. We'll start small, but I don't want anyone else in the neighborhood finding out. That afternoon, Lydia called Mr. Green, the retired antique dealer who lived a few blocks away. He arrived at their house later that day, his eyes widening when he saw the items they had brought back from the estate. These are remarkable, Mr. Green said, carefully examining a small bronze statue of a bird. Old. Valuable. Jamal watched as Lydia sat stiffly beside Mr. Green, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. How valuable? Lydia asked. Mr. Green hesitated, glancing at her. Enough to make a difference. The first sale brought in more money than Jamal had ever seen at one time. Lydia used it to pay off their rent for the next few months, fix the broken floorboards in the living room, and buy a small set of tools to repair the creaking porch. It was a relief to see his mom's shoulders relax, even just a little. But the changes around the house didn't go unnoticed. Mrs. Henderson stopped by one afternoon, her tone casual, but her questions pointed. Your house is looking nice, Lydia. Got a little extra money coming in? Lydia smiled tightly. Just a bit of good luck, that's all. Mrs. Henderson nodded, but the curiosity in her eyes didn't fade. As the weeks went by, the Carter family's small improvements sparked larger changes in the neighborhood. Inspired by the Carters' freshly painted house, Mrs. Johnson repainted her porch. Mr. Patel started stocking fresher produce at the corner store, and a group of neighbors organized a community cleanup day for the empty lot where the kids played soccer. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. The whispers grew louder, and some neighbors began to avoid the Carters altogether. They think they're better than us now, someone muttered loudly enough for Jamal to hear as he walked home from school. Jamal clenched his fist but kept walking, his head down. One evening, as Jamal sat on the porch watching his siblings chase each other around the yard, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Jamal's stomach twisted as Connor Hargrove stepped out, his expression unusually grim. Evening, Jamal, Connor said, his tone cautious. Is your mom home? Yeah, Jamal said. Wait here. Inside, Lydia was chopping vegetables for dinner. When Jamal told her who was outside, she froze, her knife stilling mid-chop. What does he want now? She muttered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she stepped onto the porch, her posture was tense, her gaze sharp. What is it, Mr. Hargrove? Connor hesitated, then said, My father passed away last night. Lydia's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry to hear that. Connor nodded. Before he died, he made it clear he wanted me to check in on your family, to make sure you were making good use of what he gave you. Lydia's eyes narrowed. We're doing fine, thank you. But we don't need you coming around here unannounced. Connor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood. I'll leave you to it. But if you ever need anything, you know where to find me. As Connor drove away, Lydia turned to Jamal. No more visits, she said firmly. Do you hear me? I don't care what they offer or what they say. We're done. Jamal nodded, but deep down, he wasn't sure if it would be that simple. The next morning, the whispers in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. As Jamal walked to the corner store, he overheard two neighbors talking near a fence. They've got money coming in from somewhere, one said. Probably handouts, the other replied. And now they think they're too good for the rest of us. Jamal's chest tightened. He quickened his pace, desperate to escape their words. When he got home, Lydia was sitting on the porch steps, her hands gripping a folded letter. What's that? Jamal asked. It's from Murdoch, Lydia said, her voice tight. Jamal snatched the letter from her hands and read it quickly. It was another rent increase, effective immediately. This is ridiculous, Jamal said, crumpling the letter in his fist. It's not fair, but it's legal, Lydia said bitterly. And there's nothing we can do about it. The frustration in her voice was enough to make Jamal's blood boil. He wanted to fix everything, to make the whispers and the rent hikes and the tension disappear. But he didn't know how. That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He thought about Walter Hargrove's words. You reminded me of hope. And then he thought about his mom, her tired eyes and calloused hands, and how she had worked herself to the bone to keep their family afloat. Something had to change. The next morning, Jamal woke to the sound of hammering. For a moment, he thought it was coming from a neighbor's house, but then he realized it was closer, right outside their home. He jumped out of bed, threw on a t-shirt, and ran to the porch. Lydia was there, a determined look on her face as she repaired the loose railing with a borrowed hammer and nails. Ma, Jamal said, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. What are you doing? What does it look like? Lydia replied without looking up. This railing's been wobbling for months. It's time we fixed it. Jamal hesitated. His mom's tone wasn't angry, but it was firm, almost defiant. Let me help, he said, stepping forward. Lydia handed him the hammer, her expression softening. Good. Start with that corner. They worked side by side all morning, replacing loose boards and repainting the porch. As the sun climbed higher, Emmett and Sophia joined them, eagerly fetching nails and holding the paintbrushes. The small project turned into a family effort, and for a few hours, it felt like the tension that had gripped their home had eased. When they finished, the porch gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Lydia stepped back to admire their work, her hands on her hips. It's not perfect, she said, but it's ours. Jamal nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, it looks good, Ma. Later that day, as Jamal walked to the corner store, he felt a sense of pride he hadn't felt in weeks. But that pride was quickly dampened when he overheard more whispers from the neighbors. They're fixing up their place like they're moving to the suburbs or something, one voice said. Probably think they're too good for the rest of us, another added. Jamal clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were wrong. But instead, he kept walking, his head down. The whispers followed him home, and by the time he reached the house, the pride he'd felt that morning had all but evaporated. He found Lydia in the kitchen preparing dinner, her face calm but tired. Ma, Jamal said, sitting at the table. Why do people hate us for trying to do better? Lydia paused, her knife hovering over a carrot. It's not hated, baby. It's fear. People see us fixing up the house, and they think we're leaving them behind. They don't understand that we're just trying to survive. But we haven't done anything wrong, Jamal said, his voice rising slightly. I know, Lydia said softly. But sometimes doing the right thing still makes people uncomfortable. All we can do is keep moving forward. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the doorbell rang. Jamal glanced at Lydia, who gave him a wary nod. He got up to answer the door, his stomach knotting. When he opened it, he found Connor Hargrove standing on the porch, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. Sorry to bother you again, Connor said, his voice quiet. But I wanted to drop this off. It's something my father wanted you to have. Jamal frowned, stepping aside to let him in. "Ma," he called. "It's Mr. Hargrove." Lydia appeared in the doorway, her expression guarded. "What is it now?" Connor held out the box. "It's a collection of my father's journals. He wanted Jamal to have them. He thought they might inspire him." Lydia hesitated, then took the box, her brow furrowing. "Why would he think that?" Connor smiled faintly. "Because your son reminds him of the person he used to be, the person he wished he'd stayed." That night, Jamal sat in his room, flipping through the journals. The pages were filled with elegant handwriting, detailing Walter Hargrove's rise to wealth, his regrets, and his hopes for the future. One entry stood out. "Success means nothing if it doesn't lift others with you. I've spent my life building walls to protect myself, but now I see the power of building bridges instead." Jamal closed the journal, his chest tightening. He thought about his family, his neighborhood, and the tension that had been growing around them. Maybe Walter had a point. Maybe there was a way to fix things not just for his family, but for everyone. The next day, Jamal shared the journal entry with Lydia. She read it carefully, her eyes lingering on the words "building bridges." "What are you thinking, Ma?" Jamal asked. "I'm thinking," Lydia said slowly, "that maybe it's time we stopped hiding." Jamal frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lydia said, setting the journal down, "that if people are going to talk about us anyway, we might as well give them something worth talking about." That weekend, Lydia invited a few neighbors over for coffee. She started with Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Johnson, two women who had always been friendly despite the whispers. Jamal watched as his mom explained the truth about their situation, the Hargroves' generosity, the antiques they had sold, and their plans to use the money to help their family and the neighborhood. To Jamal's surprise, the women were understanding. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said, sipping her coffee, "that makes a lot more sense than the nonsense people have been saying." Mrs. Johnson nodded. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of, Lydia. You're just doing what any mother would do." Their kindness gave Lydia the courage to invite more neighbors over the following week. Slowly but surely, the whispers began to fade, replaced by cautious curiosity. One day, Jamal and Malik were playing soccer in the empty lot when Mrs. Henderson approached with a group of kids. "Thought I'd bring these little ones to join you," she said with a smile. "They need something to do, and this lot's as good a place as any." Jamal and Malik quickly set up makeshift teams, the lot ringing with laughter and shouts as they played. As the game ended, Mrs. Johnson appeared with a basket of sandwiches. "Thought you boys might be hungry," she said. "Thanks, Mrs. Johnson," Jamal called, his grin wide. Malik nudged him. "See? Told you people would come around." By the end of the month, the neighborhood felt different. The empty lot had become a gathering place, and neighbors started pitching in to improve it. Someone donated wooden planks for benches, while another family brought paint to brighten the goalposts. For the first time in years, the community felt united. And Jamal, standing in the middle of it all, realized that Walter Hargrove's words had been right. Bridges were stronger than walls. Jamal stood on the freshly painted porch, watching the neighborhood come alive in ways he hadn't seen in years. Kids ran laughing through the streets, their shouts mixing with the distant hum of lawnmowers and the clinking of tools. Across the street, Mrs. Johnson was planting flowers along her fence line, her wide-brimmed hat shielding her from the sun. "Looks different, doesn't it?" Malik said, appearing beside him. "Yeah," Jamal replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It does." The transformation of the neighborhood hadn't happened overnight, but it felt like it had gained momentum ever since the community cleanup day at the empty lot. Now dubbed Hargrove Field, the once barren patch of dirt had been turned into a modest soccer field, complete with sturdy goalposts and freshly painted boundary lines. The name had been Malik's idea, and it had quickly caught on. "It's fitting," he had said with a shrug. "He's the guy who started all this, right?" Jamal couldn't argue with that. At home, Lydia had been keeping busy. With the help of Mr. Green, she had continued selling some of the antiques Walter Hargrove had given them. But she was careful not to overextend or draw too much attention. Most of the money went toward practical improvements, replacing the creaky stairs, repairing the broken fence, and stocking the pantry with more than just the essentials. One afternoon, Lydia came home with a second-hand laptop for Jamal. "For school," she said simply, though her eyes were shining with pride. Jamal ran his hand over the smooth surface of the laptop, his heart swelling. "Thanks, Ma," he said, his voice thick. "You've earned it," she replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've been working hard. It's time you had something to help you keep moving forward." The changes in the neighborhood weren't limited to physical improvements. The growing sense of unity had sparked a wave of generosity. Mrs. Henderson organized a weekly soccer league at Hargrove Field, bringing kids together to play while parents cheered from the sidelines. Mr. Patel started a small community bulletin board in his store, where neighbors could post about odd jobs or free items they no longer needed. Jamal found himself swept up in the energy. He volunteered at the field, helping younger kids practice their skills and organizing games. It felt good to be part of something bigger than himself, to see the ripple effect of Walter's gifts spreading throughout the community. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Jamal sat on the porch with Lydia. The air was warm and still, the kind of summer evening that felt timeless. "You did good, Jamal," Lydia said, her voice breaking the comfortable silence. Jamal turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean all of this," Lydia said, gesturing to the neighborhood. "The field, the repairs, the way people are coming together. None of it would have happened without you." Jamal looked down at his hands, his cheeks flushing. "I just helped an old man with a box, Ma." Lydia smiled, shaking her head. "And look what that small act of kindness turned into." Jamal thought about Walter Hargrove's journals, the way they had inspired him to believe that even small actions could lead to big changes. He wasn't sure if he deserved all the credit, but hearing his mom's words made him feel proud. That weekend, the neighborhood hosted a celebration at Hargrove Field. It was simple, just food, music, and laughter, but it felt like a turning point. Families brought homemade dishes to share, and someone set up speakers to play music. Jamal spent most of the evening running around with the younger kids, their laughter ringing out as they chased after the soccer ball. But as the night wore on, he found himself standing on the sidelines, watching the scene unfold. "You should say something," Malik said, nudging him. "What?" Jamal asked, startled. "Come on, man. This is your moment." Before Jamal could protest, Malik was already calling for everyone's attention. "Hey, everyone, Jamal's got something to say." Jamal felt his stomach flip as dozens of eyes turned toward him. He glanced at Lydia, who gave him an encouraging nod and stepped forward, his heart pounding. Hey," he began, his voice shaky. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for helping make this neighborhood what it is now. When I helped Mr. Hargrove that day, I didn't think it would lead to anything like this. But it did. And it's not just because of me, it's because of all of us. We've been through a lot, but we're still here, and we're stronger together." The crowd erupted into applause, and Jamal felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. As he stepped back, Lydia wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You did good, baby," she whispered. A few weeks after the celebration, Connor Hargrove stopped by the Carter house again. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. "My father left something else for you," Connor said, setting a small box on the kitchen table. Lydia hesitated, her expression wary. "What is it?" Connor smiled faintly. "A deed. To this house." Jamal's jaw dropped. "Wait, what?" Connor nodded. "My father believed in giving back, and he wanted to make sure you had a secure future. The house is yours now, no rent, no landlord. Just a home for your family." Lydia's hands trembled as she opened the box, her eyes scanning the paperwork inside. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say thank you," Connor said gently. "And use it well." That night, Lydia called a family meeting. As they sat around the table, she explained what the deed meant. "This is a blessing," she said, her voice steady. "But it's also a responsibility. We have to keep working, keep improving not just for us, but for everyone around us." Jamal nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The house was theirs, but the journey wasn't over. There was still work to be done, and he was ready to take it on. The weeks turned into months, and the Carter family settled into a new sense of normalcy. The house became a hub of activity, with neighbors stopping by to chat or borrow tools. Hargrove Field continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience and unity. Jamal kept busy with school and soccer, but he also found himself dreaming bigger. Inspired by Walter's journals, he He started researching ways to bring more opportunities to the neighborhood after-school programs, scholarships, and job training initiatives. One evening, as he sat on the porch with Malik, he shared his vision. "You think it'll work?" Malik asked, raising an eyebrow. "I think we can try," Jamal said with a grin. Malik grinned back. "Well, if anyone can pull it off, it's you." As the sun set over the neighborhood, Jamal felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew they could face it together. Because in the end, it wasn't just about survival, it was about building something lasting, something that could lift everyone up. And that, Jamal realized, was the legacy Walter Hargrove had hoped for all along. The days following Connor Hargrove's final visit were surreal for the Carter family. The realization that they now owned their home, a place that had always felt temporary, brought a mixture of relief and disbelief. Lydia spent hours reading over the deed, her fingers tracing the legal language as if trying to confirm its reality. "Ma," Jamal said one evening as he sat beside her at the kitchen table, "why does it feel like it's still not real?" Lydia looked up, her expression soft but weary. "Because, baby, when you spend your whole life worrying about losing what little you have, it's hard to believe when someone finally says you can keep it." Jamal nodded, her words sinking in. He thought about Walter Hargrove's journals and the stories they told about how wealth had isolated him, how regret had pushed him to give back. The connection between their family and the Hargroves still felt unlikely, but it had sparked something that couldn't be ignored: change. The neighborhood's transformation continued. Mrs. Johnson's porch was now bright with pots of blooming flowers, and even Mrs. Hill, who had once been the loudest critic, had taken to repainting her fence. It seemed like everyone was finding ways to contribute to the small but growing sense of pride in their community. One afternoon, as Jamal walked home from the soccer field, he spotted Mr. Patel outside his store, hanging a new sign that read, "Neighborhood Hub. Resources and opportunities available here." "What's that for, Mr. Patel?" Jamal asked, pausing on the sidewalk. Mr. Patel adjusted his glasses and smiled. "People need a place to come together, to share information and ideas. I thought this might help." Jamal grinned. "That's a great idea." "Thank you," Mr. Patel said. "You and your family have inspired a lot of us, you know. Sometimes, all it takes is one spark." Jamal walked home with a renewed sense of purpose. If the neighborhood was willing to rally together, maybe there was a way to make an even bigger impact. Inspired by Mr. Patel's initiative, Jamal and Lydia decided to host a meeting at their house to discuss ways to improve the neighborhood. They spent the evening before preparing, arranging chairs in the living room, and setting out snacks. Emmett and Sophia helped by coloring signs that read, "Neighborhood Meeting Tonight," and taping them to nearby fences. When the night arrived, the living room was packed. Neighbors of all ages filled the chairs and lined the walls, their chatter creating a warm buzz of energy. Lydia stood at the front of the room, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked nervous at first, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We've all seen how much this neighborhood has changed over the past few months. And I think we all know it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we decided to work together." The crowd murmured in agreement. "But there's still more we can do," Lydia continued. "We've come a long way, but we can go further if we keep building each other up." Jamal stepped forward, holding one of Walter Hargrove's journals. "I wanted to share something," he said, flipping to a marked page. "Mr. Hargrove wrote this before he passed. True success isn't measured by what you keep for yourself, but by what you give to others." The room grew quiet, the weight of the words settling over the crowd. "That's what we're trying to do," Jamal said. "We're not just fixing up houses or planting flowers. We're creating a place where everyone feels like they belong. And I think we can do even more after-school programs, community gardens, things that make life better for all of us." A round of applause broke out, and Jamal felt a surge of hope. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Lydia worked with Mr. Patel to set up a small scholarship fund for local kids, using some of the remaining money from the Hargroves' gifts. Mrs. Henderson organized a rotating schedule for parents to watch the younger children at Hargrove Field, giving them a safe place to play after school. Jamal and Malik spearheaded an effort to turn an abandoned lot into a community garden. With donations of seeds and tools from nearby businesses, they gathered volunteers to clear the land and plant vegetables. One day, as Jamal watered a row of tomato plants, Malik leaned on his shovel and grinned. "Man, can you believe this? Us, running a garden?" Jamal laughed. "I know, right? But it's pretty cool." "Yeah," Malik said, looking around at the bustling lot. "It's more than cool. It's ours." Months later, the neighborhood looked and felt like a completely different place. The houses were still modest, and the streets still showed their wear, but there was a vibrancy that hadn't been there before. Hargrove Field hosted regular soccer matches, with kids and adults alike joining in. The community garden flourished, providing fresh produce for families who needed it. And the bulletin board at Mr. Patel's store was always filled with new opportunities, job postings, free classes, and neighborhood events. Jamal stood in the middle of it all, feeling a quiet pride. He thought about how far they'd come, from the days of struggling just to get by to building something that lifted everyone up. One evening, as the sun set over the neighborhood, Lydia called the family outside. She stood on the freshly repaired porch, holding a small plaque in her hands. "What's that, Ma?" Emmett asked, squinting at the shiny brass letters. "It's a reminder," Lydia said, turning the plaque toward them. The inscription read, "The Carter Family Home, built on kindness and community." Jamal felt a lump form in his throat as Lydia handed him the plaque. "Go on," she said. "Hang it up." With Malik's help, Jamal mounted the plaque beside the front door. When he stepped back to admire it, the weight of everything they had achieved hit him all at once. "It's perfect," Lydia said, her voice soft. Jamal smiled, the warmth of his family's love surrounding him. That night, as Jamal lay in bed, he thought about Walter Hargrove. He thought about how a single act of kindness had changed everything for his family, for the neighborhood, and for himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. Because now, he understood that the greatest strength wasn't in what you had, but in what you gave. And with that thought, he drifted to sleep, the quiet hum of a hopeful neighborhood outside his window. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more inspiring, heartfelt content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means the world and helps us create more content that uplifts and connects us all. Thank you for being here.